another activity, and we're really excited that you can join us today. So here at the AIM Center, we are working toward a more equitable world in math and science, and our Hands Online is a session to come and invite you to be creative with us, to learn something new, and to dive a little bit deeper into imagination, creativity, and what maybe STEM or STEAM looks like. So today we're going to be looking at what I have up here on the wall. It's called Papel Picado in Spanish, and it literally means to poke holes in paper. We use these a lot in the Mexican tradition for celebrations. They could be birthday celebration, holidays, national holidays. And one of the central ideas around this kind of craft or creation or making is the idea of symmetry. So I have a question for you, and you can share it in the chat feature. And we want to make sure that you are free and know that you are free to communicate with us in the chat anytime you need to, especially when we're in our making portion. If you have any questions about what steps I did, or want to see something again, or have a question about materials, always feel free to communicate with us that way. But I wanted to ask you a question. Where do you notice symmetry in the world around you? So do you know what that means? Have you noticed it? Even look around the room where you're sitting. Do you see anything that comes out to you in the word symmetry? Does it seem like it's an example of symmetry? So go ahead and share in the chat. Where might you see that? All right, we're already getting some great answers. We see that in nature. So we have some answers: butterfly wings. Butterflies are symmetrical. There's a lot of insects in our world that have symmetry. The design of chairs. So yes, so even man-made objects have some symmetry. And we notice that engineering has this replication of symmetry, because that usually means stability. If your chair wasn't symmetrical, it probably wouldn't be comfortable. It probably would be awkward. I'm not sure if it would be exactly stable. Maybe there's some ways to make asymmetrical things, but that idea of symmetry is kind of pleasing to our eyes. So we'll see a lot of man-made objects that have symmetry. So I wanted to, as you're free to still share some answers, I wanted to go to my .cam because I wanted to introduce you to maybe a tool that you haven't seen before, which really uses symmetry. So here in the .cam, hopefully it comes out all clear, I have some examples of symmetry. And one of the tool that I wanted to introduce you to is this tool right here. This is made of plastic. It's a dark red color, and it's called a mirror. And you might have seen a mirror maybe in your math class, maybe in a geometry class, but maybe even in an art class. Because one thing that mirrors do is they help reflect something so that we can draw. So if we wanted to replicate, you probably can see that in the mirror coming as I draw closer to this line that I made. You can see if I drew it around this as being my line of symmetry, that it's a reflection. It's a reflection of this figure over across the line, and it makes that figure on the other side. So one way we could use a mirror is to just use it to trace. We might get a pen or a pencil, and we would trace that line and be able to duplicate it on the other side. And because the mirror is not a mirror, so it's not solid, I can see through it. And I can simply trace that over there on the other side. And I can actually see through it. I can see the reflection and make a quick trace around there. Another way we can use a mirror is to see if symmetry exists in a figure. So I found this card, a playing card. And if you see, as I put the mirror close, it'll start reflecting the card. And especially around that central figure, as I get closer, I could find the line of symmetry because I can see the figure become what it looks like to begin with. And you can see that in the reflection of the mirror. Now, this card isn't exactly symmetrical because this line of symmetry would reflect this figure across to the other corner. And we see that there's a figure over here. But this figure alone, yeah, we can see that its line of symmetry is a vertical line that goes straight down the middle. So today we're talking about lines of symmetry. There are other types of symmetry that are in the world around us. Rotational symmetry, different kinds of symmetry. But today we're going to especially use lines of symmetry. And I'm going to hand it off to my colleague who's going to talk a little bit about the history of Papel Picado. It'll be surprising maybe to you where it actually began. And then we're going to go into and dive into our activities. So while my colleague is speaking, if you don't have everything you need, let me go through it quickly. You need paper, and really you can use any kind of paper that you want. Traditionally, it's tissue paper, which tends to be really delicate. So I like to invite people who are doing this for the first time, maybe just to use regular paper, even recycled paper if you want to, newspaper if you want. And then all you need is pen or pencil to make some marks, and then scissors, and then we can get started. So with those three simple things, can go ahead and grab them, and then go ahead to pass it off to Steve, who'll share a little bit more about what we're doing today.
Excellent. Thank you, Aileen. Chris, if you could make me co-host, I could share my video as well. Symmetry is very important for this particular project, but it also, we find it in many, many different other areas. We find it all throughout nature. A simple way to see the symmetry that Aileen is talking about is just by cutting a piece of fruit. If you cut an apple, dissect an apple, you see that there is a line of symmetry, or a peach, or kiwi, even a pomegranate has a line of symmetry, at least one line of symmetry. The picture of the tomato that we have here, you can see that right down the center of the tomato, one side seems to replicate the other one. And so we see this idea of symmetry in many, many different places in nature. It's represented in many places and is a fundamental aspect of both plants and animals. On the next slide, we have symmetry ourselves. We can draw a line of symmetry representing the left and right sides with a vertical line of symmetry. Interestingly enough, humans are not perfectly symmetric. Our right side is not exactly like our left, but and there are various activities that you can do, to, especially now with technology and Photoshop, and being able to represent two left sides of your face or two right sides of your face, and how they look very different than a face that a normal face with both left and right sides. Of course, there's an activity where you can represent half a face and then have your students draw the other half across that line of symmetry. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, there was always the ad in the back of the magazine, which for an art institute, where they gave you a picture with a half a face or half an animal, and you had to draw the rest. And you could send it in as a contest prize, and each week in that, and see how good an artist that you actually were. All right. So what we're going to look at is this Papel Picado, and it actually has a long and interesting history. We often think of this as being a decorative craft made by cutting the elaborate designs that Aileen's going to talk about into sheets of tissue paper. It's considered a Mexican folk art. The designs are often cut from as many as 40 or 50 colored sheets of tissue paper stacked together with a guide, and then using a template, a mallet, and a chisel, you can make as many as 50 banners at a time. Interestingly enough, that this art form actually began not in Mexico, but in China centuries ago, where where tissue paper was originally formed. That tissue paper and the art traveled through Europe in the 1600s, and eventually was brought to Mexico in the 19th century. and where it really took a hold, found its place in where haciendas and decorating the haciendas, especially during religious festivals. Often it was founded in Mexico, that where people would work with paper during their breaks, as they were after or during the times they were working in the field. They would have some downtimes and they would cut these beautiful designs into the paper, and with practice and transmission from generation to generation, these techniques became refined, it became elegant, and really found a wonderful art form, founded a wonderful art form. In the 1930s, the practice began to spread, and by the 1960s, it peaked in Mexico City, which was then being recognized as an international art form. Now, whenever we think of Papel Picado, it's impossible not to associate that with holidays, and especially the Day of the Dead, which is a emblematic celebration in Mexico. But the role of that celebration is not mere decorative, but there is a deeper meaning. First of all, paper in general was used in religious ceremonies through Mesoamerican civilizations in terms of decorations, and comes from ancestors in Mexican Empire, and from the Mayans and the Aztecs. Color also has great importance with Papel Picado. It serves as different functions. Orange represents mourning. Blue was linked to deceased, those who were deceased or drowned by water. Red represent fallen warriors. Purple represent Catholicism. Green for youth. White for adults. Yellow for elderly. And black for the underworld. There's tremendous amounts of symbolism within the colors and with the designs, and developed and has developed over the centuries into this beautiful art form that we see here. And so we're going to play a little bit with this and these designs. I want you to think about the symmetry involved, the techniques, the intricate artwork, all of these, the spatial piece as these, your particular artwork or your particular pieces are being developed. Aileen, why don't we play with some
Yes, so we are ready. I love to hear the history about that, because I think that we have to remember that STEM is not culturally neutral, and the ways that we make have cultural ties and traditions that have been passed down. And so I hope that this is a way to kind of investigate cultures. I'm sure there's so many other cultures who use paper decorations in different ways. Today we get to do a little bit of what is in the Mexican culture, but whatever culture you're from, I'm sure that you can share in the chat some other things that you do that are making and maker-centered learning. So we're gonna go ahead and get a paper. I am gonna switch to my dot cam, but before that, I wanna do some folds. So I wanna talk about the paper. Today, I'm just gonna be using 8.5 by 11 to make really big flags, a lot bigger than the ones you see on my wall. Those ones were made with tissue paper. But we're gonna start off, we're starting off assuming we're all novice to this. And we're going to start off the folds and then do some cutting, unfold and do some cutting. So if you've ever made snowflakes, maybe you've made some snowflakes during winter time to celebrate holidays, or maybe just to make snowflakes to hang up in your house or for a celebration, you've kind of gotten a little bit taste of that. I've made snowflakes before, and you have to fold it a certain way and do some cutting on the edges. This is a little bit different. What I found here is that we're folding and unfolding a lot, unlike the snowflake. So we're going to be folding, and then I can't resist but to open it up and see what it looks like. So we'll be talking about what do we think it's going to look like before we open it up. So that's the kind of paper I'm going to use. So I'm going to hold that paper up, but it really doesn't matter what size of paper that you have. A smaller rectangle works just as fine. You'll just have to gauge how much designs you can cut in the length that you have. right? So when you get your piece of paper, we're going to go ahead and fold it in half, long ways horizontally. And this is pretty forgiving, unlike origami where you have to be really, really precise. This is pretty forgiving. So definitely a place where very young ones can fold with us and cut with us. The only thing I found on the thicker paper instead of the tissue paper, like Steve was saying, they used to do 50 sheets at a time with the chisel because they used to stack the thinner paper up and just cut away. The tissue paper is a lot easier to cut on. So that's the biggest difference that I'm finding when I use the thicker paper. So after we fold it in half, we're going to fold it in half again, the same kind of direction. So edge to edge. So I have it in half and I fold it in half again. The first thing we're going to put into this flag is the decorations at the bottom. Now on this first one, we're going to just kind of follow all the same directions just to get a sense of what we're doing. But then as we move on to a second iteration, I want you to explore and think about different things you want to try, or things that you did the first time that you want to iterate again or change. All right, so before I put this down, I just want to mention that this is how I folded it. I had it full, I folded in half and half again, and you can see I made 1/4, pretty even columns of 1/4 there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put it down in my doc cam and turn that one on and switch over and move some of my examples out of the way. We'll revisit those in a bit. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do our design at the bottom here. Now there's two traditional ones. There's like a pointed design at the bottom, and then there's kind of a scallops, which is a rounded. So let's go ahead and start off with a more pointed kind of design at the bottom. So how deep or how wide you want these, totally up to you. And if you need to use a straight edge to kind of separate them or stagger them the way you want, you can be very precise or not precise at all. I found that when I did my first ones, I just kind of freehanded it and drew it in and cut it out. And that's kind of how I started, just to get a sense of what it is. But I invite you to use a method that's more comfortable for you. So if I wanted to do more pointed, I might just sketch in kind of how I want the edge to be.
Aileen, your open edge is on the right side?
Yes.
Okay.
And for this first part, since we're just doing the bottom, the folds on the top aren't really as important yet, but those will become important in our next step. Yes. So I'm just going to sketch in kind of helping me to guide me when I do my cutting. So that's what this is going to serve. So I just kind of drew in kind of a zigzag. And we're going to go ahead and cut that out first. Now, depending how thick your paper is, if you're using something like construction paper, or I wouldn't recommend cardstock because that would be really, really thick. But I mean, if you had thicker paper, of course, that's going to be a little more difficult with the folds.
Wrapping paper would work very well.
Oh yes, wrapping paper. That's a really good idea. That's a little bit more, that's stronger than the tissue. So it would be better for the little ones, especially. I'm all about reusing. So there's tissue paper lying around or extra paper, I always try to think about what I can make with those scraps.
I was thinking about where I have tissue paper, and the tissue paper for gift bags, and our box of wrapping paper has those kind of reused wrapping paper.
Or sometimes when you just don't have enough to do a gift, you just have a little left over. That's the perfect size to make something.
I would suggest newspaper, but hardly anybody has newspapers anymore.
Oh, that's true. All right, so you can see I just kind of put in that design. Now I know there's people that might have like scissors that already have different shapes, that crafting scissors that have different designs. That would save a lot of time. I would see how that would go with the thicker paper, but perhaps tissue paper that would work very well. And this is where it's interesting to open it up. And this is where we can infuse a little bit of math. Because here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points here. And to ask maybe how many points will I have when I open this up? And think about how many times I folded it and how I folded it. And those are always interesting questions to just have a conversation about the mathematics that we're using right now. All right, so I open it up and I see my nice zigzag there. I really like that as a way to decorate that bottom piece. Now, if you notice, there are some that have these little kind of windows that are right above it. And I think I had that on my blue one, but I think it was on the scalloped one. But if you notice here, these little diamonds or rhombuses that are right at top. So the way we put those in is that we fold the edge just slightly up. Now, how much you fold it will depend on where those end up. And I can sketch those in really quickly for you, but you don't really need to sketch these in. But this is going to be definitely pretty thick to cut out. So you have to think about just the kind of paper that you have as well. But it's just a little triangle trying to be at the center of those points. It doesn't have to be exact. If you cut out that little triangle there, you can get this nice little design at the bottom. One of the things that I noticed about this is just very simple shapes to cut out. Always amazed me at what it turned out to be when I unfolded it. Ovals and triangles of different sizes and shapes and semicircles. Just experimenting with all sorts of different simple shapes at first. I definitely have a lot of respect for those those craftsmen who did, or craft women who did 50 sheets at a time though.
I would love to see that done in person.
Yeah. All right, so then when I unfold it, we'll see that design. And then when you open it up, I'll have a nice design at the bottom. All right, so now we're at our folds where we're going to start putting some designs inside of our flag. And this is where we have to make sure that the orientation is precise. So we're going to take it back to the halfway mark. We're going to bring the open side over. Oh, actually, we're not going to bring the open side over. We're going to keep it this way. And I'm going to keep the folded side on my left side. Right? The open side on my right. So I think this orientation is a little bit easier. And I'm going to bring the top edge down to the bottom. And just eye it the best you can because you've already cut the bottom out a little bit. So depending on what you cut there, this is the shape we should get. Okay, so right here is the center of your flag. This is closed. This is where your creases are. The openings are on your right side. That's where you should have the openings at. Okay, and with this orientation, we're going to make some designs here at the top and on the left side only. So on the left side and at the top. You can even include something if you want to cut out something in the corner. And one simple way is just to cut out a little triangle of the corner. And then we can make some designs. How deep you want to go is really up to you, the depth of these. You can be shallow at first as we're experimenting. But if you just want to make like some triangles, maybe some more rounded shapes like that. I've also seen kind of like this shape where you have like a point, almost like a blade of grass. Just experiment, just think about other shapes you want to try, maybe like a kite-like shape. And then you could repeat patterns if you want to repeat patterns, or you could want to make a certain pattern here. Make sure they have some space between them. You don't have to worry too much about spacing with the thicker paper. Thicker is not as delicate, but if this was thinner, I'd be careful in not wanting designs too close together. Maybe make another oval here and a little triangle here. Okay. So yeah, so you could do this the same as me, or experiment with another shape you want to experiment with. And I'm going to go ahead and draw some in here. Just be mindful that this space right here, it has to end a little bit higher because you have your cutouts already there. So just be mindful with your layers on the bottom. So I'm going to just turn this around. It's easier for me to draw. And that's probably all I want to put on that side. So we're drawing our designs on the top and on the left. Once you kind of get a handle of this, I mean, you don't really have to even draw it out if you don't want to. You could just experiment with cuts and your scissors, which is completely fine. I think the only mistake I've made before is to cut on this side, and that was just making sure I'm mindful of the orientation. Right, so I'm going to start cutting. So after you draw in your designs at the top and the left, we can start cutting. And think about, what will this look like when you're done? What will some of these shapes become? I think we got a hint with triangles. And we're using that line of symmetry for all of these. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. You can comment what you're trying, maybe some different shapes. You want to put a heart, cut out a half of a heart shape. What will it turn out to be? And so on this center, I'm just going to cut diagonally, but you can cut a point out if you want, or experiment on a different shape in that corner and see what the center might look like. Mine's pretty shallow. If you wanted yours to be deeper, you just have a bigger design right in the center of your flag. All right. It is messy. Lots of things that we do that are fun and making are messy, so that's okay. So this is what it looks like when I draw in my designs and I cut them out. And wonder what it will look like when it opens up. Where will these designs be? Well, we remember that this is folded in force, right? So if I unfold it one time, there's one of my lines of symmetry right there, right? And there is my other one. And if I open that up again, you can see my lines of symmetry that I used, right? One horizontal, one vertical, vertical, horizontal. And these shapes that I do now have like this crescent look, the diamond, the triangle, kind of the oval shape that I cut out here. So different ways that those shapes change based on the line of symmetry that I cut them out on. Yeah. Did it do what you expected? That's a good question. And when we get something that we didn't expect, sometimes it's very cool to go back and say, oh, okay, how did I get that shape again? And to remind ourselves what it looked like when we were cutting that out, right? Just like this. All right, we have still a lot of space here. And this is one of those things that when you open it up, you see the space and you're like, oh, okay, what do I want to put here now, right? So we're going to use a line of symmetry that's going to come diagonally this time. And so what we're going to do is we're going to fold down up. We're going to fold up this corner up to this edge up here. And I want to get it into this space. So you can kind of change it depending on where you want those designs to go. You're just folding in a line of symmetry that you're going to use there. Right, so my rectangle is kind of wide, so that's what it's going to look like when I fold that up. This is the line right here I want to use, and being mindful that I already have some things cut out there, so I want to give some space here. And depending the depth of some of your cutouts over here, you want to be mindful what's in the back so that you don't overlap it unless that's what your intent is. So I probably want to do shallow, maybe a little bit more deeper designs, and then go to shallow again, right? So I can go ahead and start putting in my designs with my pen. Maybe I'll start off with just some simple triangles here on the edges. Maybe in the middle, maybe I'll do something that looks more like a petal. And maybe next to it like this. I wonder what that will do. And then maybe just another really tall triangle right next to it. Right. So that there's not that much space here, but we're going to definitely take advantage of where this line of symmetry is going to come out in the flag. So I only could fit 1, 2. This one was a little bit bigger, and then just 1, 2 on the edge. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start cutting. And since you opened yours probably to look at it from the first cuts, if there's something you want to duplicate, you can duplicate that here in the center of your, of the edges of your flag, or you could think about trying something just a little different this time and see what happens, see if it's what you expected.
I'm fascinated by what the shapes will look like when you open it up, when you unfold it.
It reminds me of that puzzle that we did with a single hole punch, where we were trying to get it to look a certain way at the end. But we had to put it, we could put as many folds as we wanted, but we only could put, I think, one hole punch to get the end puzzle. Paper is definitely thicker here, so it takes a little bit more hand strength to get through that. So I've cut out everything on this diagonal that I drew in. And so when I unfold it, I wonder what it'll look like. That's the line of symmetry. So here's what it looks like when I go back to my fourths, right? Now I can open it up to my half. And you can see that line of symmetry. Oh, it got a little close there, so it went into the other one a little bit there. And then you can see it up here. And then you should be able to see it on the other side. Wow. So that line right there are the designs that we just cut out right there. Now, usually these flags, you can also, if you wanted to do some designs on this empty space, what you would do is you would just go back to your orientation again, where you have like the top, middle, and then you could fold in a line of symmetry anywhere on these flags that you really want to. And you can put in some more designs there if you wanted to. The top is usually left blank because that's where we use adhesive to put it on a piece of string to hang it. These look beautiful when the light shines through them and you can see all the intricate designs. But in its basic form, we pretty much have a flag that's done. But of course, you can always revisit it. And if you thought of something else you wanted to put in the corners, you could go ahead and do that. If you have any craft tools that you might want to use that cut out different shapes, you might want to use that, or just experiment with different things and then come back to this later. So I hope yours turned out great and you have something that you'd like to start off with in your first try of this. Are there any questions? We want to do this at least one more time. Let's see how much time we have. Yeah, I think we can go through the folds maybe one more time just to get everybody used to that. We will have resources on our website later. But let's go ahead and go through the folds again, and then I encourage you just to experiment with maybe something else you'd like to try. So I'll go ahead and switch to my FaceTime camera real quick so I can go over the folds. So any sheet of paper, and I'll show you real quick the ones that I made that were smaller out of tissue paper. So these were out of tissue paper. I think I could cut around 3 or 4. That's kind of what I experimented with. And I just cut rectangles of the same size out of tissue paper. So those are the ones that you see on the wall here. And it really is nice. Most of the tissue paper that we get already has like this color scheme that we probably enjoy those colors together. So just really easy to do multiple ones with tissue paper, and it's a lot easier on your hands. So if you'd like to use tissue paper, you're more than welcome to do that. But let's
If
go.
you do have access to origami paper, that does work about the right size, and it does work very well.
Yeah, that would work as well. So yeah, you can cut, like if you wanted these to be smaller, you could just cut this sheet in half and have some smaller size flags. That would be completely fine. So we're gonna go over just the folds, and I'll let you kind of experiment with what you want to do with that. So you take your sheet of paper and you're gonna put in the half and the halfway again. This is the first piece of just getting that bottom design in, right? And when you're putting in that design at the bottom of your flag, the orientation of the folds and the where the crease side is or where the crease side isn't, that doesn't matter too much yet. So in this blue one, you'll see that I put in not the points, but a scallop kind of design, so rounded. But experiment what kind of things that you want to go ahead and put in there. I did put those little designs in the top of it. So how wide you want those, how close together you want those, just experiment with what you want to do on that side. You could even put them on the sides if you wanted to. So in that case, you would just probably want to hold it at half and then put the design just on the edges if you wanted them on the edges of your flag. All right, so then going back here to my camera. So we have it in force, and this is where we draw our design here. I'll just go ahead and draw it. Maybe I wanted to make this one more rounded. And we discovered that whatever we do here, that's going to be replicated in quarters, right? So whatever you want to do there. If you want to make this design have that little window opening, then that's when you just fold that bottom half, depending how high or low you want those, right? Then after we did that, we opened it up and we had to fold it so that the center was on our left side. So that's when we took the top edge down to the bottom. And that's where your center has to be on your top left so that you put in the designs on the left side and on the top side. Right, and you can experiment whatever you'd like to make as far as designs on those. Maybe you want to make a more rounded kind of theme or more pointy, or, you know, experiment with different shapes, or if you have some hole punchers, you could use those, or craft scissors. Once we did that, that's when we folded it up. So we got this side and we folded it up, and that's how we got that kind of diagonal right here. Depending on how deep your cuts are here, you have about this length to put in some designs here, right? So that would be the last of your designs. If they're very shallow, like I said before, you can also bring this side up and then put in some designs on this other diagonal if you like. And that just depends on what kind of designs you want or what you want to experiment. It also depends on how big your sheet is. If your sheet of paper is bigger like mine, you might have a lot more space. If it's smaller, there might not be as much space to try. All right, so I'm going to give just a little time to play. I'm going to go ahead and do one with some of my sheets of paper here. And then if you have any questions, we'll come back in a few minutes and then we'll just close up. So let's see how many I have. I have 3. I'll do 3 sheets at a time. One thing I noticed with the tissue paper, it's a lot harder to fold. It has like the slippery side and this more rough side, but it's a lot easier to cut. So advantages and disadvantages. And with thicker paper, points are easier to cut out than rounded. Rounded things are harder to cut out of thicker paper.
Oh, I noticed that. The other thing I noticed, if you're going to do this in a classroom, have lots of trash cans available.
Yes. Yes. And make sure you plan some time for cleanup. Be nice to the custodian. It's a nice classroom activity if you wanted all students to make their own flag. Nice way to just decorate the walls or a place in the library altogether. Community.
It might be a good opportunity to ask parents or grandparents if their experiences with, if they have any experiences creating these.
Yes. And doing it in small groups is fun because then you can see each other's flag and then you can ask questions like, how did you get this design? What did you do to get this part? And just the sharing of ideas is so fun to see other people's ideas and things that they're trying. All right. I'm going to do just a little bit more on this side. Some triangles. All right, so this one I did get to do another line of symmetry right here to kind of fill in the space. Now I get to open it up. I did 3 at a time because I did tissue paper. Maybe I'll go back and do some little designs at the top, at the bottom, but yeah, I like that. And then you can see what it looks like when you do that added design in this space. You have those little corner designs. Well, if you have any questions, we're here to answer questions, but I just wanted to go a little bit over some of the STEAM that we're seeing. So we definitely talked about symmetry. Symmetry is a really important thing in the world around us that we notice, the line of symmetry, but also in mathematics, finding that line of symmetry, talking about what it means to reflect over something, to reflect over a line. That's really some basic ideas in geometry about the figures that children see and where those lines of symmetry are and how do you describe the characteristics of them. It's something that we start to notice around us, but the words and vocabulary, I think, are really helpful for adults to help children find those words and to talk about that. If you're going to explore that, you can explore it in the most simple ways of just going out and taking a walk around and talking about things that are symmetrical. But also, I think the basic thing of just folding the paper in half and cutting out that half of a heart and then opening that up and seeing that it's the whole heart. I think that's one of our most common memories of being introduced to what it meant to have something that was symmetrical, because that was kind of the way we used to make our Valentines. There is a question in the chat. Let's see. What is the recommended age for this activity? That's a really good question. I know that Probably young ones are going to have a little bit harder of a time. I would say I did it with my daughter and she's in first grade. She's 7. And we did some of this together. It's just about the cutting and the shapes. So maybe really emphasizing it doesn't have to be exact. Like even if you draw something and don't exactly cut on the line, it's okay in this instance. A lot of the experiences that they get, they're trying to, stay on the line. This is really forgiving. I mean, if I don't go exactly on the line and the triangle's off a bit, it's still going to look nice. So that's one of the really fun experiences that I think younger kids can have around just developing their motor skills, but doing it in a playful way that really is helpful. So I've done it with a child as young as 7. I mean, I think it just really just depends on the children. It might be a community activity where an adult and a child do it together, and maybe there's cutting and happening in turns. So maybe there's ways to incorporate younger kids, but maybe they don't make one by themselves, all by themselves and just alone. Very good question. We use some tools today. We definitely use paper. Paper is one of our favorite tools here at Ames. We love to use paper and to see all the different rich ways that paper can be used. Remember, you can use any kind of paper that you want. You will just have to think about the folds that you put in and how much strength it'll take to cut out the different shapes. But reusing paper and maybe using things like reusable paper can help children not feel like they're going to mess up right away. Making is an experiment. There's iterations just like there is in engineering. So when you're trying out something for the first time, always emphasize that, mistakes are valued. We're going to learn from this first experience. And then as you do it more, you get better at it. So hopefully children will enjoy their time, not feel like they have to perform or do it so perfect the first time. Engineering, I think we talked a little bit about that just right now, just the iterations. Everyone is going to be different. Everything is going to be different. But the way you discover, like Steve was saying, like you discover what kind of shapes make different designs, and sometimes you're just surprised at those, and sometimes you discover things that you want to replicate again, or you want to make better, or you want to change in some way. So there's a lot of engineering happening here where you're just iterating it. You can also go back to a flag. So if a flag is already made and you discover something along the way, you can revisit that first flag you made and put in the fold line and then add something different to it. So that's kind of fun. Art, so definitely a way to be artistic. I think for me, the more making I'm doing, the more I'm being attentive to color and to patterns and the colors that I use together. I think I wasn't as attentive to that before, but I visited an art class, and when they were picking out the origami paper to make a model, it really mattered to them what colors they were picking and if they were pastels or primary colors. So that's really helped me be more attentive to color. I think art is a beautiful way to express yourself. And I think as we do some of these activities together, we can start thinking about how we incorporate art, but how that's meaningful in the colors that we choose, what we use. So maybe if you're using some kind of reusable paper that's from maybe a map that you have or a place you visited, there's lots of ways to incorporate different artistic elements. And then we talked a lot about math. Of course, we talked about the math that was happening in the symmetry. Science, where do we see some science? Steve, did you notice some science? Well, spatial.
Well, definitely the spatial, the symmetry, the spatial language that we use. You used a lot of spatial language today, talking about the cuts that you were making and the folds that you were making. I see a lot of overlap with science in terms of the symmetry, and we can think of symmetry in terms of the microscopic, in terms of the atoms and molecules. We can think of symmetry in terms of sunflowers and faces. There's a lot of connections there.
Yeah, definitely. So many connections. So thank you so much for joining us today. Feel free to share with us on social media, tag us at Ames EDU, and we'll hope that you'll share some of these things that are happening. For our next Hands Online webinar, we have modeling clay. And so we're really excited to look at, Play-Doh, clay, all the ways that are around us, and the simple materials, the more common materials. But we hope you'll join us for that. We're excited to see some new things happening here at Ames. And so we get to explore with you beforehand, and we get to share it with you. So that's always fun. So please as well visit aimcenter.org, where you'll see the recording of this webinar and some other resources that you can find there that are free to use and free to share. Thank you again for joining us. We hope and you'll continue to play and have fun and do STEAM in meaningful ways, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, everyone.